So let me start. Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, based on wherever you are. Welcome to this webinar that is under JHTM anniversary 30 JHTM anniversary webinars. We had so far 5 webinars under this JHTM anniversary festival, and this is 6th one. And we will have the last webinar next week on 21st of November. The topic of this webinar is climate change, environmental concern, and tourism, current trends, and future agenda. The topic of sustainability has very long history and is not new concept. Sustainability and also sustainable tourism started about 5 decades ago. And we had a long story and long way come here for sustainability, especially from environmental perspective and environmental lens. Now is very good timing. Yesterday and today, Javier and Sarah share some news about COP29 next week, and this year, for first time, we have one day for tourism, thematic day on tourism, and they discuss about climate change and tourism. So is very good timing for this webinar. And in this webinar, actually, we will discuss, we have 3 experts to discuss about climate change and environmental concern in tourism. Before introducing our panel members, just 2 points. Please keep your mic mute until end of presentation, and post your question in chat box. We will have 15 to 20 minutes at the end for Q&A, and we will actually go for your question to our panel members. So our panel members today actually, and this webinar will chair by myself. I'm Mustafa Rasulimanesh from Edith Cowan University, and my colleague, Dr. John Su from Iowa State University. We are both associate editor for Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Management, JHTM, and we will share this session. Today we have Professor Sarah Dolniker from the University of Queensland, Professor Xavier Font from University of Surrey, and Professor James Heim from Griffith University, and 3 prominent scholars on sustainable tourism and the topic of today's webinar. Now I pass the floor to my colleague, Dr. Joanne, to introduce journal and talk about journal, and then we will go for the panel. Dr. Joanne.
Okay, thank you, Mustafa. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to JHTM webinar. In this slide, I will be play a anniversary song, and with some greatest things the JHTM has accomplished for the past 30 years. So now, please join us to celebrate JHTM.
20 years of the rise, Journal of HTM shines. In tourism and events, sharing knowledge worldwide. 30 years on the road. Journal of HTM shines. In tourism and events, sharing knowledge worldwide. 7.6 impact score. We strive to do more, and hospitalities grow. We're opening new doors. In the field we come in, building insights that fit. For researchers to grow, we lead and we transmit. building insights that fit for researchers to grow. We lead and we transmit. The field we come in, building insights that fit for researchers to grow. We lead and we transmit. It's all around. We are champions. It's all the best. Every knowledge. All around. We are champions. It's all the best. Every knowledge.
Okay. Thank you very much for listening the first session with us, and I hope you enjoy reading the slides and celebrate with us like how wonderful JHTM has done for the past 3 years. And trust us, we have more to come. And now I would like to turn the floor to Mustafa and let him to introduce our first panelist.
Thank you very much, John. Actually, the sound that I don't know you heard or not, because sometime was breaking for me, was birthday song actually for JHTM that was produced and generated by AI. So we use AI to generate birthday song for JHTM, and uh, Joanne explained that we had actually a great progress for 30 years for JHTM, and these series of webinar actually to celebrate this anniversary and the 30th anniversary of JHTM. Our first speaker for panel today is Professor Sarah Dolniker. She is an expert on Airbnb regulation, sustainable hotel operation, and social marketing. She has co-authored over 300 refereed papers and led the 16 Australian Research Council ARC grant, including prestigious QE2 and laureate fellowships. Dr. Donliker has received more than 30 awards, including 2 Lifetime Achievement Awards, the Travel and Tourism Research Association Distinguished Researcher Award 2017, and the Slovenian Ambassador of Science 2016. She currently serves as editor-in-chief of Annals of Tourism Research, with her work recognized for its global impact on tourism and environmental sustainability. Professor Adolniker, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mustafa. Let me just see if I can get this screen up and running. Can you see it?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right, I've got 10 minutes. I will just briefly reflect on research for environmentally sustainable tourism and ask the question whether it's all talk, no action, or whether we're moving towards action slowly. And actually, the 30-year framework is pretty interesting. So that's relevant to sustainable tourism as well. I'd like to start with a chart that you all see very frequently on social media and everywhere, in different variations, in circles, in triangles, in whatever. And it's obviously the temperature change. And the way I make sense of it, because it's very abstract to us the way it sits, right? The way I make sense of it is if I plot when my mom was born and when I was born. And I realized just how privileged my mom was to raise me for a world that she knew, because you see the temperature patterns are pretty similar. And this is when my kids were born. And it really scares me, right? Because already now it's unrecognizable, but in their adult years, it's very unclear what I could possibly teach them about how to live their lives. So we are on a highway to climate hell, and the sad thing is we still have our foot firmly on the accelerator. We all know how important tourism is. GDP, jobs, this is all legitimate, especially for countries that really do need, desperately need the economic benefits of tourism. But it comes at a high cost, right? It comes at about 9% of CO2 emissions globally. And these emissions are increasing by more than 3% every year. So despite all the narratives, we are not reducing, we are not improving. As the industry grows, the CO2 emissions increase actually proportionately because we have very little efficiency improvements. We also waste a huge amount of water. We generate a gigantic amount of waste. So it's a real problem. And it's not a problem that's new, right? 30 years ago, here we go, same anniversary. And that's funny that I have James and Xavier here because obviously you are much more affiliated with the Journal of Sustainable Tourism. But that was the editorial when it was founded by Bill Bramwell, Bernard Lane and Bill Bramwell. And I tried to visualize, they didn't put that in their paper. But that's basically what they say, right? 30 years ago, they say, you know, we're in a climate where we're starting to get skeptical about growth. We need to balance growth with natural resources. 30 years ago, they say, well, the existing work is great because we've analyzed the impact of tourism, right? However, what we need to start doing now, he says 30 years ago, we have unresolved questions. What can individuals do to make tourism more sustainable? What can organizations do to make tourism more sustainable? What can governments do to make tourism more sustainable? I should say, interestingly, actually, the first origin I found was 79 by a sociologist, Eric Cohen, who already analyzed, not with numbers, but just conceptually explained just how dramatic the impact of tourism could be on the planet. All right, well, what has happened in the last 30 years? In my opinion, there's kind of three streams of research. There is still a stream of research that is either discussing or providing evidence of the negative environmental consequences of tourism. And that's an important stream of research because we need to measure. If we want to improve something, we need to measure it. Then there's a second stream of research where we have conceptual suggestions of how to fix the problem. And of course, the most recent trend is regenerative tourism, right? I tried to illustrate my view of regenerative tourism. So if you imagine we have a pre-vacation status, right, of nature or whatever it is, a social community, then we go on vacation. And then there's really three things. In the middle is sustainable outcomes. So we leave the place behind in the same state we found them. At the bottom in red is the unsustainable outcomes. So we have damaged something. We have, we have created carbon emissions. We have used resources. We've created waste. So that's unsustainable tourism. And then on top, we have regenerative tourism, the idea of which is we leave the place behind better. So we have these conceptual proposals, but obviously, often they lead to nothing. And to me, the regenerative concept is quite interesting because I think we've come absolutely nowhere with sustainable tourism. So to lift the bar and say, well, we can even do better than that now, I find really quite amusing and sad, actually. And then we have the third stream of research, which is empirical work investigating potentially possible solutions to fix the problem. And if you look at this, there were two recent reviews that review. Now, what I will say, to be totally clear, I'm only including studies that have actually measured behavior. So there's a million studies that have measured behavioral intentions. I'm totally not interested in those because it's well established that behavioral intentions for behaviors that are socially desirable, that's not only sustainability, that's also, stealing or other stuff, but socially desirable behavior. Intentions are never a valid proxy for actual behavior. So if we look at the studies we have with actual behavior, there's not much action. So you can see here the kinds of things that we were studying, and you see a timeline, how often it was done. And you can see there's a very little density on that plot. Just to give you three examples to give you a taste of what I mean by research that tries to change stuff. So looking at plate waste, one of my favorite studies of all times is by Scandinavian researchers I've sadly never met. They reduced the plate size at the breakfast buffet of 52 Scandinavian hotels by 3 centimeters. And just by that little modification, they reduced plate waste by 20%. That's a big deal, right? Because food is responsible for 26% of all carbon emissions. So if we can reduce food waste, that's a really big win. And it had zero impact on guest satisfaction. We can reduce room cleaning, and I'm talking about daily unnecessary room cleaning. Very simple. We just switch it around. Instead of telling people, tell us if you don't want your room cleaned, which is the current default model, we switch it around and we say, how about you tell us if you do want it cleaned? We're not going to charge you. It's still free, but it is upon request only. So that little change in operations reduces unnecessary daily room cleaning by 63%. Does it matter? Yes, it does. Every room cleaned in a 4-star hotel, 35 liters of water, 1.5 kilowatt hours of electricity, 100 milliliters of chemicals. Yeah, so it all adds up. So if we could continuously improve, that would be brilliant. Third example is another one of my favorites. That goes in the kitchen. Again, not my study, but I love it because it's so simple and so effective. So this group of British researchers went and replaced a big intransparent waste bin in a kitchen with a small transparent bin and reduced kitchen preparation waste, that went too fast, by 73%. Yeah, so that's what I mean by solutions. These are little solutions. Of course, bigger solutions are better, right? But any solution is better than no solution. Yeah. All right, this is the little shocking table that gives you a bit of an overview. So you can see in the rows all the different behaviors we might want to target. And there's probably many, many more. And along the columns, you see the theoretical constructs we might use to change these behaviors. If we've done a lot of work, it's green. If we've done a little bit, it's yellow. If we've done nothing, it's red, right? And I think that's now self-explanatory. A lot of work to do if anyone's interested in that area. The other thing we see when we look at all this research is that we are firmly focused on beliefs. So here what you see, each bar is one theoretical construct. And the height of the bar tells you how many studies we've done using those theoretical constructs. So everything we do, most of what you do is about trying to change people's beliefs. Yet we increasingly understand that people don't use cognition when they make these sustainability decisions. Success rate is relatively low, even among published articles, and we know about publication bias. Only about 58% of belief-based interventions are successful. Nudging is much more successful. Social norms we use a lot is also not as successful as you would think. Nudging, I didn't circle this, is 82%. And what I like most of all is increasing enjoyment. I think that's something we're not doing enough because tourism is about enjoyment, right? And if we could get the target behavior to be more enjoyable, my hope would be that we can get people to behave more sustainably. All right, what do we need to do if we want more action and less talk? First of all, we do need to tackle the big ticket items. And the big ticket item is obviously transport. So, the one behavior that we haven't managed to change, except during COVID, when we locked down the borders, is to make very localized travel that you can reach by train or by an electric vehicle attractive. Yeah, attractive, not just tolerable, but actually a really viable solution. We need to get governments to regulate. So I hope Jayen's talk will make a big impact with all these important people, because if they don't regulate, the change is just too slow. We need to develop more effective behavior change interventions and prove that it actually changes behavior. And that's another challenge I face. We actually have a few things we know that they work, but adoption by industry is not happening. So whenever we know something works, we need to find a way to get industry to adopt. All right, and finally, we go back to the 1993 chart and we look at it and we say, how far have we come? And we have to be a little bit sad about that because we're in exactly the same space, right? We're still in a growth skepticism climate, but no step further than that. We're still analyzing the impacts, but we still are lacking the big solutions to answer the unresolved questions. That's it from me. I'm not sure, am I taking questions now or are we taking them later, Mustafa?
We will take question at the end.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Joanne, go ahead. We cannot hear you, Joan.
Okay, thank you. And now let me briefly introduce our second panelist, Dr. Xavier Founts. Dr. Xavier Founts right now is a professor at the University of Surrey, and he specializes in sustainable tourism production and consumption with a focus on sustainability marketing and communication, as well as using the sustainability evidence to inform the policy. Dr. Xavier Founts has published extensively on sustainable tourism journals, and he advised the travelocities coalitions, including the major industry players such as the Amadeus, Booking.com, and Google, helping them to align sustainability framework across the tourism supply chain and effectively communication them to influence consumer behavior. Right now, Dr. Bounds serves as editor-in-chief of the Journal of Sustainable Tourism, and he is here today to bring his research expertise to promote sustainable practice in the industry. So, Dr. Bounds, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. It's worth saying that both Sarah and I are on the Travelist Independent Advisory Group, not just myself. It's just that her CV is too long to highlight everything that's in it, so I chose to do it instead. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is the case for purposeful research. And I think my ideas follow very closely from what Sarah does. We never coordinate our presentations, but it looked like we do, because they kind of follow each other quite nicely. And so the point I want to make, and the one thing I want you to remember from these 10 minutes is this. Please, 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 publish and disseminate purposeful research that you can co-create with whoever you want to, but usually people will be the users of your findings, and that research is supposed to help you create the societal change you want to see. The idea that you will do research and that somebody will just somewhere find it and learn from it and have an epiphany and just change their lives is a complete joke. Okay, and maybe I'm just getting a little bit older and getting a little bit less patient with what we can or cannot do, but I just don't see us being able to create that level of change unless we work a little bit harder at it. So what do I mean by purposeful research? I could have called it impactful research, but the idea here is we don't always know whether it will have an impact, but we can certainly start the project with a clear purpose. And the purpose has to be to influence change. And maybe in other topics you'd say that's not necessary, but I think when we're trying to research climate change and sustainability more generally, I think we need to. So before you start writing an article, in addition to asking yourself what will be the theoretical construct, what will be the rigorous methodology, and so on, also please ask yourself, what's the difference I try to make with this particular article? Whose behavior am I trying to change? Will I be trusted by the people that I'm trying to influence that change? And how would you gather the evidence that you're creating some of that impact? And I think at the moment, we're not in a position where our work does that. So let me give you quickly 4 examples of my work that somehow relate to climate change and sustainability that may be helpful. And then we go back to some takeaway lessons or ideas for all of us. Not that long ago, I happened to have picked up a couple of papers from Annals, not because Sarah was here, but because they're quite recent work of mine. Very recently, we talked to different destinations and we found out they mostly measure, and really well, the benefit of tourism. For example, the expenditure. What they don't measure is the costs. So we decided to come up with a concept of cost-benefit analysis for carbon and measuring in a very simple way, very imperfect way. Yeah, Jens would be embarrassed of my work, but in an imperfect way, being able to say with the data destinations already have, can we visualize the size of the pie, which is percentage of the market that comes from that particular country, and then on the vertical, how much they spend for the whole trip, and the horizontal, what's the carbon footprint that's necessary from that work. Now, the important thing here is we gave every single destination an Excel spreadsheet so they could calculate it for themselves, and we provided training for more than 180 members of staff from different destination management organizations, mostly in Europe. And we helped them reflect on what this data meant for the kind of management decisions they could take or marketing decisions they could take in their destinations. And we wanted to be able to create change by doing this. At some other point earlier on, I was asked to consult on the European Union's 2050 policies. This is the European agenda for tourism. This is the long-term vision of where we are trying to go as an EU. We managed to publish this in Annals of Tourism Research. So people that say something that looks like consultancy doesn't always work as research afterwards. In some cases it does, if you then are able to explain why this is sufficiently important. And as a result of this particular piece of work, we have then helped also the European Commission design the tourism transition pathway. And the latest data I've come up with together with the Commission shows that the Commission has invested more than 13 billion euros as a result of the policies that we help to co-create with them. Going back closer to the kind of work that Sarah does, we have looked at how we can help destinations and hotels reduce the water consumption from tourism. And we have seen that by providing actual, instantaneous feedback and using the feedback intervention theory to explain this, we're able to show how by people seeing the length of time they spent in the shower, they will shorten their shower length by 15 to 20%. And we also were able to prove that by adding messages next to the timer, we don't significantly change the length of time they'll spend in the shower. As a result of this, we're now working with L'Oreal, the people from Because You're Worth It, to be able to then show you how we can use this kind of technology to also help L'Oreal change the chemical formulae in their products, because showering is a very personal behavior, very private. And we've now been experimenting with them by using this device, but without showing people the length of time, how we can then help them reduce that length of showers. So it's likely that L'Oreal will be changing the chemical formulae from what essentially is a £30 million market share on shampoos and conditioners to help people be able to reduce their showers at home. And a fourth and final example before I go to takeaway lessons, we mapped out the voluntary carbon offsetting messages that 37 airlines across the world are using at the moment. Suzanne Becken did the same mapping 4 years earlier. We reproduced a methodology, and then we updated it and we added more level of depth to the methodology. We're able to find that not only the number of airlines using voluntary carbon offsetting had reduced, which I can't tell you whether that's a good or a bad thing, but that actually 50% of the messages were misleading because they exaggerated the kind of benefits that could come from voluntary carbon offsetting, and almost it gave you the feeling that you could exonerate your potential carbon impact because now you have done this token message. Now, it's worth to say that, for example, when I do a piece of work like this one, we then go back to every single one of the airlines. We provide the data to the airline saying, this is where you are providing trustworthy messages. And then as a result of that, I think one of you needs to mute your microphone, please. Thank you. And so by going back to the airlines and then being able to show them where they can make improvements, I'm hoping to not only do the public, telling them what the benchmarks are, but being able to show them the change they can create. Because all of us have limited time to do our work and we have competing interests and priorities, I would stop thinking of publications as being something that goes completely against engagement and impact. And I would sit down with your research team and ask yourself these 6 questions. How do I use publications to generate more impact? Or how do I use my opportunities for impact to generate better publications? If I have chances for internal or external income, how do I use that income to generate better publications? And how would past publications give me better income? And so on, between income and impact. And I think we need to look at these as not competing, but positive reinforcement loops between the different things that all of us are being asked to do in our work. So take away home lessons for you now. After this call, go back and find the article that you're most proud of that you published in the last 2 years. And ask yourself, what is the change I wanted to create with this impact? Whom do I want to influence with that change? And then if I don't know enough about the people I'm trying to influence to create that change, how do I learn about these people's daily jobs, about what they read, about the things that inform their thinking? And how do I make sure that I speak in the places and in the channels that those people are likely to trust. Then I want to ask yourself, going ahead, what is the motivation for me to change this year? What will be the barriers for me to change the type of research that I do? But also, what will be the support I'm going to need? Who do I collaborate with to be able to do research differently? And collaboration is going to be key. Okay, you'll have to figure out how do you reach out and offer to collaborate with the people you want to influence. This can be in your village, this can be in your country, this can be across a sector. You choose. With some of those people, you may not be able to collaborate directly because they're not prepared to collaborate with you, and you'll have to find a 2, 3, 5 year plan for you to be trusted to then be able to collaborate with them somehow. And the final element I'm interested in here is at some point, your government, your university will ask you to evidence the impact you're creating. I know that research funders will ask you to do that. And the bigger the pot of money you will be bidding for, the more evidence of previous impact, as well as a clearer pathway to impact and evidencing future impact you are going to need. So you need to ask yourself, how do you keep evidence of engagement with stakeholders? And engagement is not impact, but it's a stepping stone to impact. How do you keep evidence of the change that you contributed to? And then with whom and how and for what reasons will I share this evidence? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Xavier, for a very insightful presentation and talk about purposeful research. If I want to summarize Sarah and Xavier's presentation, what we can learn as academic and researcher that focus on something that can contribute to a bigger agenda of sustainability and sustainable tourism. We had a very long story about sustainable tourism, but the evidence show that we haven't been very successful, and we didn't have significant process and progress in this process. But what of course, we are not the only player in this field. There are a lot of different players. But as academic, since this is the anniversary of 30th anniversary of a journal, as academic, what we can do is to do some impactful and purposeful research to change behavior of tourists, behavior of government, behavior of destination manager, and see what the type of research we can do to contribute in this agenda. Thank you very much. By that, we go to the third speaker and panel member, Professor James Heim. James' research address issues of tourism and global environmental change as informed by the geographical concept of scale. At the global scale, his research focuses on climate change and decarbonization, with a particular focus on tourist transportation. At the national and local scale, his research addresses protected area, policy and planning, tourism and biodiversity, and conservation management. He served as co-editor of Journal of Sustainable Tourism from 2014 to 2021. A feature of Dr. Heim's research is a commitment to end user engagement, public dissemination, and debate, particularly as it relates to climate complacency and inaction and the greenwashing. Prof. Heim, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mustafa, and thank you, Joan, for making this opportunity available to us. Thank you to Sarah and Xavier as well for your presentations. By complete chance, my presentation actually dovetails and builds upon your presentations rather nicely. My name is James Heim. Thank you for the introduction, Mustafa. My primary affiliation is with Griffith University. I'm also an honorary professor at the University of Otago in New Zealand, and it's from Dunedin, New Zealand, that I'm speaking to tonight. I want to touch on 4 current research projects, and I'm not going to tell you anything about the results of these research projects, but I'm going to share with you some insights into how difficult it is to change the world through our research. This is maybe sounds a little bit pessimistic, but I'm just trying to be realistic to highlight some of the challenges that we face. I'm not going to talk about social change, as Xavier has. My work particularly focuses on policy settings and how we can use governments, state apparatus to change the settings for tourism to help us to actually shift the dial. This first project is currently underway. It's a project that I'm working on with Susanna Becken, who's a colleague of mine at Griffith, along with Shane Vuletich, who's a statistician based in New Zealand, and Oz Shahin, who's a dynamic modeler based at the University of Queensland. And in this project, we are looking at tourism optimization in the southern region of New Zealand, as you can see here on my website. But we're not just looking at tourism markets in terms of optimization. We're creating databases that measure not just tourism variables, but all variables that tourism touches within a destination. And we're advancing some dynamic modeling, which will help regional tourism organizations to think about how they manage future growth. Future growth has very clearly emerged in this project as being directly linked to emissions. And if this destination wants to mitigate its emissions and get onto a stable and sustainable emissions pathway, then growth has to be managed. Simultaneously, the Christchurch International Airport Authority 2 years ago secretly purchased 790 hectares of agricultural farmland in this beautiful Upper Clutha Valley, and subsequently proposed the idea of building a new international airport in this rural valley. This is only 60 kilometres away from Queenstown's International Airport, which has a capacity of around 2.5 million passenger movements per year. This proposed new airport will have a runway of sufficient length to welcome long-haul flights from 15,000 kilometres of range directly into this rural landscape, and a capacity to cater for up to 4.5 million additional passenger numbers per year. You can imagine the effect that that's likely to have on the carbon emissions of this regional destination. As a response, I wrote a letter to Christchurch City Council, which is 75% owner of the Christchurch Airport Authority. It was co-signed by 79 other academics in New Zealand and internationally, outlining what the research tells us about carbon emissions arising from aviation and how this proposed airport might impact the climate future. That letter, as I say, was directed to the decision makers. We created this website, which we called Informed Leaders. And I hope you can see this. We created a research index that makes, within all of these categories on the right of screen, available all of the international research informing decision-making in this critically important area. So we've created this index to make sure that the most current research is available to decision makers so that it might hopefully shape their decisions. We've had some success by directing this work directly to the Christchurch City Council. Secondly, I'm working on a project now that's funded by the MB Endeavour programme in New Zealand. This is a collaboration of 10 researchers, 7 computer scientists and technologists, 2 Indigenous academics, and 1 tourism academic, myself. And this project looks at how we can use technologies to create virtual and augmented experiences that can be experienced in person, in situ, but also by remote audiences. Part of the motivation here was to overcome the future risk of border closures, perish the thought, so that tourism businesses can remain functioning even when visitors are physically unable to visit. But many other motivations as well around, for example, decarbonising tourism experiences so that people might choose a virtual glacier overflight rather than a high carbon in-person helicopter-based glacier overflight, particularly when those glaciers are in sharp retreat. Last week, we showcased some of these technologies at the Tourism Industry Summit in Auckland, and we got a really positive reaction from many very innovative and visionary tourism businesses in this country. But one thing really struck me, and that was that at the summit, the big players, by which I mean Air New Zealand, for example, and Tourism New Zealand, the major marketing agency of government, were very much focused on sustained and relentless tourism growth, which contradicts much of what we're trying to achieve in tourism. This is a real barrier. There's a battle, if you like, for what the future of tourism might look like. And I was really upset by some of the comments that were made. For example, the director of Tourism New Zealand stating that the upside of extremely hot summers in Europe might be that we get more low season visitors traveling to New Zealand in the southern winter to escape the European heat, which I found, totally unacceptable. And I discussed this in my weekly podcast to kind of highlight this arm wrestle, if you like, in terms of what the future might hold for sustainable and climate safe tourism. Thirdly, I have recently completed a study of cruise tourism in New Zealand, the first really in-depth and critical study of the positive and negative impacts of cruise tourism in this country. We took a four capitals approach to this study. So we didn't just look at the economic impacts of cruise, but also the environmental, social, and cultural impacts. Here's the table of contents for the report, which now sits on the desks of various government ministers who will be considering the recommendations that we put forward at the end of this report. Unfortunately, the report is currently embargoed until those ministers have deliberated and made decisions on this. This project involved various colleagues. Ya-Yen Sun, who's been mentioned already this evening, led the economic analysis. I led the environmental analysis with various collaborators at Otago and the Centre for Sustainability, and I co-led the social analysis. The cultural analysis was separated from the study and led by Ngāi Tahu, the indigenous tribe of this part of the South Island. I can't tell you the findings because the study and the report is still embargoed whilst being deliberated upon by government. But it's interesting to see that just last week, with the start of the cruise season in New Zealand, the New Zealand Cruise Association and the Cruise Lines International Association have released a report on the economic windfall of cruise tourism in New Zealand, $1.37 billion a year, apparently. All I can say is that's not what we found. So I don't know what their data is. I don't know where their evidence comes from, but it's very, very different to the work that Ya-Yen led and our analysis of the economic impacts of cruise and tourism in New Zealand. I've tried to request the full report arising from this project from the Cruise Association, and I've been told, unfortunately, the full report is only available to Cruise Association Gold, Silver, and Bronze members. So if you're not in the club, you're not going to get to see the report, which means there's no transparency here. We don't know methodology, we don't know rigor, we don't know what's been included in their economic impact analysis, and of course, it hasn't been peer reviewed. So a lot of lobbying going on with the Cruise Association, and that's a barrier that confronts us as well. Fourthly, and finally, this is the most extensive global tourism emissions analysis ever conducted, led by Ya-Yen at the University of Queensland over the last 3 years, and accepted for publication today in Nature Communications. So our timing is very fortuitous. Ya-Yen is going to be traveling to Baku, departing on Sunday, to present this work at COP29. Again, I can't tell you the results of this project because we're awaiting online publication. But Yen has approval from the editor of Nature Communications to share some of the key findings at COP29 next week. In the meantime, the WTTC has revealed its own reporting on the carbon emissions associated with global tourism. And very happily reported in Perth last month that there's actually been a decrease in global tourism's carbon footprint. Really? Doesn't that contradict what Sarah said at the start of the hour, that global tourism emissions are around 9% now and increasing at 3%, if not more, which means that global tourism's carbon emissions will double approximately every 21 years? Well, no, apparently, according to the WTTC, which of course is an industry organization, what do we have here? That global emissions have actually gone down. They've gone down. I can't see the figure because your profiles are covering it. I think it was down from 7.8 to about 6.5 or thereabouts. That's a very, very different figure to the figure that Sarah mentioned. And in fact, this has been revealed by 2023 data, which also comes as a surprise to us, because in the study that Yen led, we used all data up to 2020, because a lot of these data sets were discontinued due to COVID, and 2023 data isn't even available. So how the WTTC comes up with this very, very pleasing result, none of us are actually quite sure. And you might see in the second from last sentence here, we're decoupling growth from emissions and therefore lowering the environmental footprint of global tourism. Once again, not sure about the rigor of those findings. But when I go online to the WTTC website and actually look for details of the report, I find lots of economic impact studies, but the carbon footprint analysis is hardly front and center. It's hardly accessible and transparent. So again, we're coming across these obviously very significant barriers around the future of tourism and the future of our global climate. So I want to finish by really emphasizing that when it comes to policy debates, we are in a competition for influence, influencing ministers, influencing governments. And this is a fierce competition. Our research, and by this I mean all of our research, contributes to the evidence base. But does the evidence base actually shape and influence policy? Because in this environment of intense competing interests around the growth paradigm, we find that industry interests are relentlessly focusing on influencing policymakers and government. The WTTC, the International Civil Aviation Organization, the Cruise Association, travel agents, inbound tourism operators are very much focused on government, on growth. They are paying for media. They are lobbying governments. They are making grand claims about economic impacts in the case of the Cruise Association. They're making grand and very optimistic claims about carbon mitigation in the case of WTTC. Rarely, if ever, is the evidence actually publicly available and open to scrutiny. And I suspect that this is simply because those reports, when we look at methodology, when we look at data, when we look at rigor, and when we look at peer review or absence thereof, simply doesn't withstand close scrutiny. So what are the challenges that we face in the academic community? We face enormous challenges, not just to build the evidence base, and publication is obviously crucial to building the evidence base and gives credibility through peer review, but how do we disseminate our research? How do we engage in public debate? How do we try and inform policy? I'll leave you with this quote to end. Evidence-informed policy is all about deliberate and rigorous approaches to support policymakers with the best possible evidence. But we're in an arm wrestle, if you like, with industry lobby groups, because a lot of policy is based on intuition, lobbying-based ideology, anecdote, and short-term political and economic expediency. I want to just finish by saying that all of 4 of these research projects are being regularly updated on my website. And I use this as a platform to try and disseminate findings in a timely manner when publications appear online. I also have a weekly podcast titled Checking In, where I try and share some of these insights and some of the implications of research, which I hope will be of ongoing interest to anyone who cares to listen. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, James, for insightful presentation and talking about some fact on climate change and the impact on tourism. Actually, I was in the conference WTTC summit last month, and when I heard the president say that CO2 emission contribution of tourism to CO2 emission to tourism decrease to 6.5, really the pleasing news, but I could not find any evidence and research to support this, and also in the website I could not find, and this contradictory with some other data. Hopefully the next week we hear some result of research by Yayin in COP29 and see what's reality and what happened for this area and climate change and tourism.
Well, thanks, Mustafa. Sorry, can I just quickly say that
sure.
Xavier will be chairing panel discussion, and he may have comments to make this evening on this very topic, because the WTTC will be there too, and this competition for attention will continue.
Yeah, Xavier, you have any comment on this?
Well, I think it'll be very interesting to see how they sit at the same table. My understanding is that WTTC has been asked to provide the methodology to Yayen to have a look. Not that Yayen is ever not busy, but she has spending even more time looking at this so she can make an informed comment about the methodology. WTTC is a lobbying organization. You know, they're there in the same way that James Heim was just saying clear, the Cruise Lines Industry Association is also a lobbying organization. And they're there to protect the benefits of their members in the short term. And sometimes the benefits of their own members, short term and long term, are probably quite different. We would all like to think as academics, we think of the long term benefits. I think there's a high opportunity cost from ignoring the reality in the short term. So anyway, they will be at the same table. I will be in charge of asking some questions and generating a healthy debate. The issue with a place like COP is that unless it is being live streamed and recorded, it's a conversation between a very small group of people, and the people are there mostly to talk, not to listen. So you'll find that there are very few opportunities for the outside world to know anything other than the press releases that the most powerful organizations will issue as a result of their predetermined ideas of what has already happened.
Thank you very much. Now is open to audience for their question. Please post your question in chat box from the panel member. So we have first question to Prof. James. How can we make use the gray literature review considerately in the research given the issue you raise here?
Kia ora. Hi, Anna. Lovely to hear you tonight and to receive your question. Thank you. I think the key point that I really want to make is that that academic published literature, grey literature, can contribute to the evidence base, but it needs to do so in a way that's really transparent. And at the risk of repeating myself, I think it's really important that we do critique sources. We do understand their limitations. I think Sarah mentioned that there's been a lot of research on beliefs, less so on actual behavior change. So we need to understand where the research is going, what the limitations of the research are. And certainly when it comes to grey literature, I think that industry reports, government reports may be subject to political expediency. They may be subject to particular political persuasions. They may be sponsored and influenced by lobby groups. Sometimes that's not transparent, so it's hard to see. But I think the key point is that we just need to really be critical of the sources that we're reading, the sources that may be influencing our thinking.
Thank you very much, James. Another question here. I think this question can go to Sarah. So this person asked about some methodology for measuring actual behavior, because you refer to actual behavior and as an impactful research. So if please answer this question.
Yeah, great question. I think that the thing about behavior, it's not that complicated, but it's more work, right? So oftentimes people say, well, you know, I can just put it on Prolific and I have my results tomorrow. Sure, you have your results tomorrow, but you don't have any findings tomorrow. You just have some numbers that you're going to crunch. So, you know, when we think about sustainable behavior, Xavier showed you the water study. So he used a device that just measures using noise how long people shower. Now that is actual behavior, right? The shower duration is actual behavior. So then he shows them direct feedback of how many liters they're using, and at the same time measures how long they shower. That's a measure of behavior. But it could be much simpler. You could go and collaborate with a hotel and try to get people to reduce towels. Then you would ask the hotel, are you monitoring how often you're replacing the towels? Yeah. So that's data. Or you want to reduce the use of single-use cups in a cafe. Well, you could actually use the purchasing data of the single-use cups. You want to get people to order vegetarian meals. You can use the sales data of the restaurant, right? So there is no one solution. But I think what I notice a little bit collectively is the lack of willingness. We've done surveys for so long that we've just become so comfortable. And as reviewers, we've just accepted that that's the world we live in. But it's just not good enough. For some things it is, but it's not good enough to make statements about behavior that you want to influence businesses or governments if you have not actually measured behavior. So it really depends which behavior you want to measure. You can also do pure observations, right? I spent a few days at a hotel at a Hilton here at the Gold Coast, actually, just looking at people at the buffet to understand why are they leaving food behind? Are they overfilling? You know, what's going on? So behavior can also be just observed. Psychologists have done that for 100 years, right? So I think it's more that our brains are just not primed from our training in university that we should be measuring behavior, because we've constantly done surveys. It's harder than running a Prolific survey, no doubt about that. But it's actually not something that's or actually, just briefly, click behavior, that's also behavior. Review writing, that's also real behavior, right? Those are not intentions. Those are things that have actually happened.
James, you want to add something?
Yeah, great discussion. I'd just like to add that in my experience, tourism businesses are really open and receptive to your research ideas. And, I'd implore people across all stages of career to not sit in their offices, not to work in isolation, not to focus simply on publication, but think about, as Xavier said, the steps beyond publication and develop your research partnerships early in the process. Again, repeating what Xavier said, build collaborations with the sorts of experts that you need to work with you to achieve things that you couldn't possibly achieve on your own, and build in your end users. Speak to hoteliers, speak to tourism operators. They're desperately keen to learn from your empirical insights to help them to improve their sustainability performance. So I'd just like to emphasize that. speak to people. They will be receptive.
Thank you very much. Dr. Joan, go ahead.
Yes, and to the three professors, I do have a questions. Okay, I enjoy reading all your publication. I do agree. Okay, like one factors motivate me to do the research is I would like to create impactful, impactful research result that I'm not saying I'm aiming to change the whole world, but at least from what I stand, I can make a little steps. So my question is, could you please share with us what innovative sustainable practice, okay, from your perspective, you are seeing as emerging in the tourism industry that can reduce the carbon footprint while we maintain and provide a memorable experience for traveler and consumers?
Yeah. I think Xavier should start. Do you want to start? You haven't answered one yet.
Yeah, you're giving me the hard one here, right?
No, I'll take it. I don't care.
No, I mean, so if you look at most of the studies that we publish, we're not even publishing whether the actual reduction in carbon footprint, let alone finding two data points, which is how is that intervention helping or maintaining or improving the memorability of tourism experiences, or at least the satisfaction of visitors, as well as helping us reduce. So, I mean, there's a lot done, however, in kind of user-centered design and human-centered design of products and experiences, which I think would allow you to then do something in a much more collaborative and co-creative way. Right? I think doing some sort of an intervention or experiment together with an organization to design a new product experience would help. But also then you can even just collect some baseline data initially to understand where you're at as a way of then informing any future design of experiences. Sarah, look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I just want to say, Xavier, I mean, for example, the tourists you studied whose shower time reduced, they weren't unhappier, right? And we see that for a lot of the behavioral intervention studies. So the smaller plates at the buffet, the people are not less happy. They can go back to the buffet and they can go back 20 times. Nobody's limiting that. So I think the notion that environmentally friendly behavior automatically means a compromise on enjoyment is absolutely incorrect, right?
But for a sector
In
that
many
believes,
instances, it can be neutral, or in some instances, you can even gamify stuff and make the desired behavior more enjoyable, more memorable.
But with a sector that doesn't innovate, if you think about it, the concept of the hotel has changed very little other than adding Wi-Fi to it, right? And so how do we help these organizations to innovate? Every time I go to them with a new idea, they fear, how will this affect customer experience? And you're like, well, let's find out. You're an 8,000, your chain has 8,000 hotels. Let's experiment in one. We'll learn in 10 rooms in one of your hotels, see what we can learn from there. And then we tentatively keep rolling it out. And they're really, really worried about any of that change, right? But first of all, you need to gain their trust to get access to some of the data that currently exists.
Thank you very much. We have two more questions here, so I try to combine these two questions and ask this question first from James, and then Sarah and Xavier can continue. Misleading information from the industry shape public opinion. It seems everything is okay with them, and clearly it's not. So to which extent is the tourism industry really interested in changing the current economic paradigm and the economic growth paradigm, increasing number of international tourists and visitors? And the next question is, what can do DMOs and the municipalities do to encourage sustainable behavior of tourists? Maybe I can change to do more sustainable actually practices. So what the DMOs and municipalities can do. James, if we can start with you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yeah, great question. I'd really like to direct you to the podcast that I published on Tuesday this week after the TIA summit, where I speak specifically about some really world-leading businesses in New Zealand that are really pushing the boundaries of sustainability and climate action in really inspiring and innovative ways. So there is a willingness on the part of business, but I'm not talking about businesses across the board, because there are some businesses, and I've named some of them in my presentation, that are still very much focused on the growth paradigm, because demand growth is central to their business model. And the Cruise Association is a classic example of this. Airlines are a classic example of this. And that's where we need to put political pressure, because that's where decarbonisation at the national level has to lie. So we've got good and bad. As I say, there are competing futures at stake here. And in terms of DMOs and municipalities, what happened in New Zealand during COVID is that the government required all 31 regional destination management organisations to prepare destination management plans. And those destination management plans are now all publicly available. And across the board, but some of them in particular are incredibly visionary in terms of how they help businesses to encourage tourists to act as sustainably as possible. And by that, I'm referring not only to mitigating emissions. So in this country, we're very lucky that a very high proportion of our national electricity grid is derived from renewables. So businesses can switch to electric fleets, for example, to really reduce their on-site emissions, which a lot of which come from local transportation. But we're also seeing carpooling, for example, access to ski fields, where shuttles and electric vehicles for carpooling are being used to reduce the emissions associated with accessing alpine areas for skiing. But we're also looking at positive contributions to emissions, net positive contributions. So these destination management plans, which are anchored very much in indigenous perspectives of regenerative tourism, are also encouraging things like tree planting to make sure that visitors are empowered to make a positive contribution, not just when they're at the destination, but long after they leave and return home, so they can remain connected to the places that they've visited and continue to contribute to conservation management, but also climate action. So again, in terms of DMOs, some really inspiring things are happening.
If I
Thank you
can
very
add to
much.
that,
Yes,
I
sure.
think that the best way of reducing the carbon footprint of travel is to improve people's quality of life where they currently live. People are traveling in part because they find they're going to find something better somewhere else than at home. Just improve where people live. You know, like the idea, it's as simple as that, right? You're not going to stop people from traveling, but people are sometimes escaping from something more than going to something. Okay? And then another point to remember is when we talk about big businesses or DMOs, we are talking about them as if they are homogeneous organizations. But there are people within those organizations with different opinions. You just have to find the individuals inside those organizations that will be your allies, that you'll be able to work with. You just have to find a door that opens.
Thank you very much. I think we pass our time. So any last word from panel member, from Sarah, Xavier, and James, to encourage people to be more sustainable?
Like Xavier says, live it every day. You know, we can make a change individually. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. So take the step.
Thank you very much. I think we had a very insightful and great discussion around sustainability, and especially from environmental lens. Thanks our panel member, prominent scholar, an expert on sustainable tourism, Professor Sarah Dolniker, Professor Xavier Font, and Professor James Heim. And thanks all participants to attend this webinar. Hope you benefited from this webinar and tips and discussion that we had. And I encourage you to submit your high quality and good quality papers to JHTM and around different topics, especially about sustainable tourism. Thank you very much. Dr. Joanne, any last word?
Yes, I just once again I would like to echo what Mustafa he said. I learned a lot, and I also I will encourage myself continue doing research in sustainability because now I am confident every step I made it may make changes. Yeah, thank you very much. And I do have a last slide to share with you. Just show our appreciation for you today. And if you like, please subscribe and follow us on our social medias and to be JHTM's friends. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day and night.
Thank you.
Bye.